Okay, just doing a quick video on kundalini and free will, um, and tantra. So there was a recently a forum that I used to post on has a thread about me with my avatar name or whatever for the title of the thread. And the reason I left that forum is because there's no moderators, and or whatever moderators there are, they don't understand the topics being discussed. And so the one of the so they're talking about me, of course, and they're saying, well, they're talking about why I left the forum, and this is I left that forum at least 5 years ago, but even then I was only barely posting on it. Basically, there's a few people on there that just troll. They troll the site and just kind of like freak out if you try to discuss something. There's a couple good people on there um, that do good research, but I had already like learned as much as I could from them, so I decided there was no point in just like being verbally abused, willfully submitting to verbal abuse. So that comes to the topic of free will, and so the problem is that Professor Robert Sapolsky, he has been doing the internet circuit fairly recently about his latest book, saying there's no free will. But his book before that, I was looking at it because a friend of mine had checked it out from the library based on my recommendation of his work, or my discussion of his work. And I immediately realized Robert Sapolsky, he doesn't understand quantum physics. And that's a big problem because if you're discussing free will, you're going to end up getting into quantum biology. And so, and what is consciousness as defined by science, and the whole conundrum of consciousness. And I had corresponded with Professor Robert Sapolsky about, I don't know, maybe like 15 years ago or something, or 10 years ago. Oh wait, let me get this right. I think it's like 20 years ago now. And time flies. But um, yeah, I had read the book by his mentor, A Tangled Wing, by Melvin Connor, who was actually Robert Sapolsky's teacher. But anyway, the the issue is, in terms of free will, I defer to Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose quantum biology model, where they argue that, well, Stuart Hameroff, he's been interviewed about this on YouTube also, about free will, but Roger Penrose says it's essentially precognitive and proto-consciousness. Now, this is such a radical idea that most people can't even wrap their heads around it. But I was just reading a excellent book chapter article on how Einstein discovered relativity. And I haven't finished the book chapter, but it turns out that Einstein was really inspired by David Hume, the philosopher, and he was really inspired by David Hume arguing that essentially human causality of linear time is a construct of thinking, and that there's no logical proof that causality as linear time exists where cause happens before effect. Now, like I said, I haven't finished the book yet, but they're saying that Einstein, he was really impressed by this because he believed in science being based on the mathematical abstractions of the logic and not directly on the empirical data. And so Einstein believed that scientists were collecting the data, but then basically like bootstrapping it onto theories of causality without really having the justification. It's just like based on habit that the technology works, and so therefore we create these, sort of like a mythology or a religion of logic or causality. But in terms of Einstein, one of those primary myths is what they call primitive causality, which is essentially this idea that cause is before effect and time is inherently linear. And so with Einstein, you have that based on the invariance principle of the speed of light. And so what Roger Penrose discovered in his research is that quantum physics violates Einstein's invariance principle of the speed of light. And this is normally just called the quantum measurement problem. But Penrose realized that due to Bell's inequality, which violates Einstein's primitive causality, then you actually do have this superluminal signal or causality. It's not just a correlation because it's actually a causal effect. So you could call it a force or a new quality of energy. And so Penrose is in his 90s, and so he gets ignored as being, like most scientists are, just try to dismiss him as like a fuddy-duddy. But actually, he's completely cogent and articulate. And there's a great dialogue with him and his colleague, Professor Basil J. Hiley, and Stuart Hameroff. The three of them are in Finland a few years ago in 2021, discussing quantum biology at the Mind and Matter Symposium. And so Hiley agrees with Penrose about proto-consciousness being precognitive or superluminal, non-local. But Hiley is just saying due to non-commutativity, then you don't have to have this quantum measurement problem, and the consciousness can then scale into the macro level of biology. And because Penrose his claim is that any sort of precognitive perception you have to be in like an altered state of consciousness, what like for athletes, extreme athletes, they call it the zone. Or Penrose's example is a pianist, something I can relate to because I trained I trained in classical piano and memorizing music, and so essentially you're based on the experiments they're citing. It's now been proven that your body consciousness is acting at a superluminal quantum coherence before you have a thinking, like a perceptual consciousness of thinking. And so that's what they say is free will. They're saying, Penrose and Hammeroff are saying that actually is free will when you align your perceptual reality with this superluminal precognitive proto-consciousness that's non-local. And so then both Stuart Hameroff and Basil J. Hiley say, well, this allows paranormal effects to exist. And this was the focus also of Costa de Beauregard, who was a physicist, a protege of Louis de Broglie. And so he argued that due to the invariance principle of Einstein, when you combine that with quantum physics, then there's this asymmetric time that logically it forces a factual truth of paranormal reality that's superluminal. Now, in terms of quantum biology, what Stuart Hameroff and has proven with Anirban Bandio-Page is that this quantum coherence in the brain is maintained through the terahertz frequency of blue light as serotonin or tryptophan molecules in the inside the tubulin that are in the neurons. And so the tubulin is a negative refractive index with the microtubules inside the cells. And so Stuart Hameroff says this is accessed through meditation, and that you, based on Roger Penrose's analysis, you're actually maintaining this quantum coherence for a longer time when you increase the frequency of perception. And Stuart Hameroff says this can be done using psychedelics also, because that will, through the tryptophan type molecules, that will increase the serotonin receptors, so you have more of this blue light. But what Roger Penrose is emphasizing is that actually, because it's precognitive, it's actually negative resonance. And so the negative resonance being non-local and also superluminal, then is what causes an amplification of the what they call quantum undertones or beats. And so those quantum undertones or beats are then read by the EEG as the dominance of the gamma brainwaves for thinking, or for increase in theta brainwaves for during the REM, what would be considered like a visionary state, or the sense of a new smell perception would be the theta brainwaves, and the alpha brainwaves being like a relaxed serotonin level, and then the beta brainwaves are just normal thinking, and then the delta brainwaves being this deep dreamless sleep. And that's when the amplitude increases naturally. So then you have a self-healing of the neural connections, the neurons in the brain. And so you can do that through meditation directly by causing an increase in the negative resonance. And so you have then a significant increase in the delta brainwaves. So it's like a deep dreamless sleep state that they call it Nirvikalpa Samadhi in Indian yoga. So what's happening, what Andrei Puharich figured out, is that this is due to the activation of the vagus nerve as a parasympathetic reaction. And this was also discovered by Herbert Benson at Harvard Medical School when he studied the Tibetan Tumo yogis in the Himalayas. So he called it the relaxation response. So what you're doing when you do a Qigong or yoga training is you're causing an extreme parasympathetic rebound by first activating your sympathetic nervous system. And this is what the shaking medicine does, or the trance dancing, is you're using your leg muscles, but also the fact that the collagen is piezoelectric and it's vertically aligned over 90% in the body. So when you do these standing exercises with the legs bent, then you are increasing the negative ions, which then activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and that increases the serotonin levels naturally in the body. And you do that through the ultrasound frequency, because the piezoelectric is ultrasound. And so Stuart Hameroff, he even did an experiment where he had ultrasound. It's sent into his brain, and that increased his serotonin levels. So he proved that there's this direct connection. And he said he could feel the bliss effects. And they're studying that using that for healing. But you can just do this naturally through these standing exercises where your leg muscles start shaking, and then you get a parasympathetic rebound, and that will also clear out the gut, the colon, because that's what causes peristalsis, is when you have that undertone vibration as a lower body vibration. So when you are meditating with the eyes closed, you're directly resonating the biophoton frequency as what they would call spirit, your internal spirit, with the eyes closed, and you're turning the light around, as they call it in Eastern meditation. And so the more you meditate, you'll start to see blue light internally. And as the energy increases, then you'll start to see light externally as auras and spirits. But you also start to have precognitive visions. And then the center of the brain gets hot and magnetized. And if we look at the origin of the magnetic force, it's actually due to the virtual photons. But what Basil J. Hiley is pointing out is that Richard Feynman's renormalization mathematical technique was incorrect, and that the virtual photons are actually this negative resonance as a negative frequency that's non-local. So you have an actual negative frequency and time-reversed signal from the future. That's a precognitive proto-consciousness. And there's a good book on this called Transcendent Dreaming by a Minneapolis based psychologist, a PhD in psychology, and she also trained in Tai Chi and Andean indigenous meditation with the tribe. I think it's like the Cuero. Her name's Christina Donnell. And so she started having these precognitive healing dreams. And that's what her book is about. And so, in terms of the Taoist Qigong training, you have the yin qi is then this negative ions that feel like a internal tingling sensation. And each of the organs is then related to an emotion as a electrochemical energy. And that's called the Jing energy or life force based on your neural hormones. And what's happening is that the blood goes up to the pineal gland, and that increases the yang qi through the cerebral spinal fluid. So your pineal gland's actually creating more cerebral spinal fluid through increased blood flow through the full lotus meditation posture, because the full lotus or Padma Asana then puts pressure on the legs and cuts off the blood flow, and then that causes the blood to circulate up into the center of the brain. And so when the third eye opens up, then you directly access this non-local proto-consciousness of the universe based on time and frequency. And so this is something that Einstein never really figured out, because even though he helped start quantum physics using Planck's constant for the photon, he realized that this quantum measurement problem was a superluminal causation, and so he could never accept the inherent statistical born rule where you're switching between the measurement and the Schrodinger equation. And so he agreed more with Louis de Broglie. Well, he said Louis de Broglie was too simplistic for it to be real, but nevertheless, what they call the EPR, well, now science says that ER equals EPR, which means that the Einstein-Rosen wormhole of relativity, which would be like a black hole as a wormhole, actually also is this superluminal, non-local proto-consciousness that means the whole universe is like holographic as a fifth-dimensional wormhole that's also a quantum non-locality. But as soon as you say the word dimension, then you're immediately triggering this symmetric geometry that's been the problem ever since Plato, is defining space-time as a symmetric geometry based on magnitude from irrational numbers and the wrong music theory. And so this is kind of interesting, because Einstein himself, his favorite composer was Mozart. But if you listen to Glenn Gould, the pianist from Canada, he said Mozart's music was programmatic. And I tend to agree with him. I've played both Mozart, but Gould was he loved playing Bach, and I always loved playing Bach also, but more so the slow middle movement. When I memorized Bach's Italian Concerto, that's when I had this my first heart awakening from the music, because the tempo of that song, of that piece, of that middle movement is 60 beats per minute, so it's 1 beat per second, which is how Galileo first created the second measurement, was using his pulse. And so you basically start resonating your heart instead of your thinking. And when you resonate your heart at 1 beat per second, then you activate this theta REM visionary state based on this vagus nerve and serotonin. So the right side vagus nerve goes to the heart, but the right side vagus nerve originates from the reproductive organs. And so for males, in traditional martial arts training, the goal was actually for the testes of the reproductive organs to get sucked back inside the body. And so that's why you'll see in this praying mantis training, the praying mantis martial arts masters will do like a deep meditation stance, and with breath and then concentration, mental concentration in there. And then they can get kicked repeatedly in the groin. And then there's a UK show where the guy, he said, well, do you mind like feeling down there? And the guy like freaked out because there was nothing there. He had sucked it back inside his body. And so the right side vagus nerve for males connects to the testes. And so the reason this is so difficult, obviously, is you're dealing with your subconscious life force drive for reproduction for the males. And so what happens is that's triggered by a biophoton signal based on the frequency of light. So if you read the Taoist alchemy book, the Taoist alchemy, Taoist yoga, alchemy and immortality book, they call this a twinkling of the heart as a evil fire. And so what that means is that the yin qi, as the negative ions, with your eyes open, they automatically go up the front of the body and out of the eyes through the pineal gland, from that blood going up the front of the body. And once the third eye is opened up, then it can shoot the spirit light right out of the eyes. And this is why if you store up the energy so it's really strong, you can actually have pyrokinesis out of the eyes, using your eyes to focus the energy, or you could do it out of your hands or whatever. But that's as Wan Chi, or original cosmic chi, which would be like a golden light. But in alchemy, it's just called the red dragon when it's the yin qi. So it just goes out of your eyes with your eyes open. And so the trick is that once the third eye opens up, that's just the first half of the training, where you have accessed the non-local emptiness, or what they call the absolute void, that eternally radiates light, but it's impersonal. And it's both inside and outside the body at the same time, because it's this fifth dimension, but it exists as time and frequency. So it's not even a spatial dimension. It's just a non-local time frequency that's not, it's ignored in Western science ever since Platonic philosophy and all the way up through Einstein. And this is what Roger Penrose and Basil J. Hiley have been discussing and debating, and Stuart Hameroff and and Brian Josephson and Jack Sarfati, and I kind of inserted myself into that debate because I took quantum physics from Herbert J. Bernstein, and he's a highly accomplished quantum physicist. And so basically, in terms of quantum biology and free will, what happens is that you, like Master Nan Hua Chin, he talks about how you want to stay sitting in full lotus because the bliss will naturally increase. So what that means is that as like the lower body blood circulation is shut off, that forces the energy up into the third eye. And then it's now proven that the adrenal energy has to first get activated by the parasympathetic vagus nerve in the brain. And that also causes a internal bliss, the kundalini, to be activated. And then the energy goes back down to the lower body and clears out the channels in the legs. And so Master Nan Hua Chin, makes fun of monks who cannot sit in full lotus for 1 week nonstop, because he said that the pain just kept getting worse and worse, and kept he would take it deeper and deeper, but then finally he heard this loud crack in his lower body, and then his leg channels had completely opened after that point. And the person I took classes from, Chen Yulin, he went 4 weeks or 28 days of nonstop full lotus meditation in a cave. And then when he got out, he was meditating in full lotus outside the cave, and that's when he levitated. He levitated up 9 feet, spiraling as he went up. And because, he had reached that level of purification. And so this quantum non-locality as a new quality of force is also anti-gravitational propulsion. And the reason it can be scaled up is because it's non-commutative. So you have this asymmetric time and frequency, and it's only because he was in a cave he was able to store up that energy through purification. So 28 days of nonstop full lotus, I did the math on that, and I've been doing a class, free live stream class with a couple other people, or whoever else wants to join in. It's usually just the 3 of us, but so I think last time it was like 4 people. It's 100 days long, but if you do that every day for 3 days, then in 1 year you've done the equivalent of 28 days of 24 hours a day nonstop meditation. So that just gives you an idea. You have to commit yourself a minimum of 3 hours a day just to have the equivalence of 28 days. And even then, we're not doing all just full lotus meditation, because we do 1 hour of standing, the 5 elements standing exercise meditation. Okay, so the Qigong Master Chen Lin said he does not practice tantra because the frequency of energy that you take in from the bliss happening from the other person, the female vagus nerve bliss, is a low frequency of energy compared to the energy you're sending out of your third eye that goes in to the female, that then triggers her vagus nerve of her third eye as kundalini activation. So so you're actually losing energy when you do that, and so that's why the book Taoist Yoga, Alchemy, and Immortality calls this the evil fire of the heart, because what you're doing is you're splitting the Wan Qi back into Yin Qi and Yang Qi, based on the Yin Qi going out of the skull, and it's based on a psychic energy as an intention of the mind. So you're choosing to do that. And so Qigong Master Trinity Lin, he even said that that his students, what happens with his students is they overuse their psychic energy. They overuse the Yin Qi energy, because the Yang Qi energy has substance, because it's the neural hormones of the body. But the Wan Qi is a whole nother level, because that's the original cosmic Qi. And it feels like a strong magnetic force, but it's also precognitive, and it's Qigong Master Trinity Lin, he said that one time he overused his Wan Qi energy doing healing, and then he experienced this dizziness, and so he had to have one of his advanced students teach his level 3 class so he could meditate on his own and recharge his Wan Qi energy, because normally when he does healing, he's able to recharge the Wan Qi energy at the same rate that he's sending it out. So the dizziness is not just like normal, like vertigo or something. It's a space-time vortex, because the Wan Qi is actually based on this superluminal precognitive signal that then creates space-time. So it's like a quantum non-locality that then creates this wormhole, space-time wormhole. So obviously, again, we're dealing with a level of reality that most people can't even wrap their head around. So for me, I just was trying to maintain celibacy, but I didn't realize that the secret of that is the standing exercises, but it's also to flex the sphincter, because that's the low frequency energy in the spirit of the body. And by flexing the sphincter, you keep the biophoton signal in the parasympathetic Yang Qi going up the spine instead of going up the front of the body as the Yin Qi. And this is a secret that I had to look up on my own. I had to discover this, and I found 7 different sources from both India and China, where they all saying that the secret of storing up your energy is to flex the sphincter, the anal sphincter, all the time when you're not meditating. And like, I'm not even doing that right now. Well, I'm sitting in full lotus, but because it's a very odd thing to do, but that just shows how the lower dantian is where the Wan Qi is stored. But technically, if you look at the creator of Qigong, or the person who first popularized it in the 1950s, he actually said that the key secret was to visualize light behind the navel. And Qigong Master Trinity Lin, he says that the lower dantian is behind the navel. But of course, most people, like normally in Qigong, they consider the lower dantian to be below the navel, and the middle dantian is behind the navel. So why this discrepancy? And normally they would say, well, it's because there was a misunderstanding about somebody lying down versus standing up and how they described it. But what actually is happening is that the lower dantian energy has to be built up. And so if the Shen signal, the biophoton signal, is spirit, or Shen, is what then will separate the yin qi and yang qi. But to create the wan qi, you have to unify the yin qi and yang qi back into wan qi based on the purification of the biophoton signal. And so that's why all the lower emotions have to be transformed from yin qi into yang qi through a purification of the intention. So the intention eventually has to be focused on this listening to the emptiness as what's called ting in Tai Chi. So you cannot visualize the emptiness, but by listening to it, then you create this infinite resonance of time and frequency that then resonates with the absolute void. And so when you see the blue light internally, then externally that is seen as golden light, and then it can actually create new matter for healing yourself and others. And that's how the alchemical process works. And so in terms of tantra and the kundalini, if you study Bill Bodri, who was a student of Master Nan Hua Chin, he has a great article on this, something about tantra on his website. But in terms of Mahayana Buddhism, they said, well, the limitation of tantra is to empty out the lower realm of form. So the tantra is the realm of bliss. So in Mahayana Buddhism, you have the three realms of the realm of bliss, the realm of form, and the formless realm. So the problem with tantra is that you cannot technically access the formless realm, which is the foundation of the meditation practice. It's both the goal and the process of proper meditation as this purification on the formless realm, or the absolute void. In Western religion, they call it creatio ex nihilo, or creation out of nothing, which you find in the Christian church. So you can have the energy will naturally activate the kundalini of people around you, but for females that naturally sublimates through the right side vagus nerve, but for most males, they just waste the energy as a downward loss of the yang qi. And then if you continue to do the kundalini, then the lower realm of form will be activated through the middle dantian. So you feel this strong non-local magnetic love sensation. So the bliss turns into joy and love. But even that is still considered a lower emotion of overexcitement or passion through the lung energy. So it originates through the yang qi of the lung channel. So the lungs are then what the metal in alchemy is then what originally powers the kidney energy. So if you do this, you end up burning up the wan qi energy in the body, but then it's done as a catalyst, so then you can access the wan qi level, but just through the lower realm of form. So you're just like triggering the wan qi, but in order to build up more Wan Qi, it can only be done by the Wan Shen, which is the light of no light, or turning the light back around internally and then listening to the source of the light, as the Wan Jing. So you have to unify the Wan Jing, Wan Shen, and Wan Qi in order to then access the Fa Shen, what they call Fa Shen in Taoist alchemy, which is actually like a Buddhist term of like the absolute void, or Nirmanakaya, the Nirmanakaya. So it's a complicated, subtle process. And what I was doing is I was just sitting in full lotus in public and then recording my experiences. And most of those experiences were kundalini based, but they weren't all kundalini based, because it was all the other lower emotions as well, whether it was sadness of the lungs or anger of the liver, or fear of the kidneys, or the heart as the final limitation of tantra. So that you have these, basically it acts as a catalyst to then empty out the lower emotions. But as far as it then burns off the Wan Qi in the body through the separation of the Yang Qi and Yin Qi. So then the only way to further the meditation is to just focus on the Wan Qi level as the formless meditation. So it was a good experience. It was a good learning experience, but as like Gurdjieff rejected, who was the Western guy, Aleister Crowley, as a fake, because he said, even Aleister Crowley could not do this. He didn't have this ability that Gurdjieff did as tantra, activating the kundalini energy. And so, but yet most people think Crowley was some kind of so I don't know what people think about Crowley, but they're told, he was a fake. And Gurdjieff wanted nothing to do with him. And so that's the problem with the Western esoteric scene, is they're mostly stuck at the level of Aleister Crowley, and they ignore Gurdjieff. And so then of course Aleister Crowley was, freaked out about Gurdjieff. So Gurdjieff, he says, he calls this the number one person. So you can have a male who is a psychic vampire, and they're able to activate the kundalini in other people, but they do it by taking the energy. They're taking the energy and then they're just wasting it as physical loss, with a lower frequency intention. So they're not giving out any yin qi energy. They're just sucking it back inside their own body, and then using it to increase their yang qi, which then they just eject physically. And so their intention's always stuck in their lower body. It's never through the third eye. So that's basically what Aleister Crowley was doing, and it's what Gurdjieff called a number one male. And so you find that increasingly a problem, because you have, what happens is it gets hardwired in males when they grow up in an abusive environment. And so there's a big difference between sending out energy out of the third eye versus just using your lower body frequency intention to try to take energy, for your own selfish reasons, because then you're not actually doing this tantra practice, where the tantra is you have to maintain physical celibacy for the male, as the vagus nerve female energy. So this is not like most this is not understood at all, the physiology of what love is, because that leads to real love between the male and the female when you have that. What it was the required training for all males in our original human culture, was they all had to train in the female energy that they called num, and it goes up the spine, and then it creates this electromagnetic force out of the third eye that they called Kia or Kia. I don't know how to pronounce. It's like an explanation point. And then so the males would then send it into the females to heal the females, while the females were singing and the males were dancing. And that was the central core of the original human culture, what Dr. Bradford Keeney calls impersonal eroticism. So I'll end it with that. Thanks for your time.